Hi, everyone. Bob Dietrich here on another episode of the ADHD Toolbox Part 2. And I am super excited. We have Laurie Dupar back with us as our special guest. And as you know, we are talking about ADHD and other learning and behavioral challenges, not just ADHD, but specifically focusing on ADHD and really focusing on the brilliance and the genius, the other side of ADHD that people miss. And that's why I'm so happy to have Laurie here, because that's really been Laurie's focus as an ADHD coach and practitioner, and she'll tell you more. But that's really our focus today, and I think you're going to really love this episode. So Laurie, tell us a little bit about you in case some of our viewers didn't see the last episode.
Oh gosh, where do I start? I'm still growing up here, Bob. Not quite sure what I want to be when I grow up, but currently for the last 18 years, I have been an ADHD life coach. Prior to that, I was a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. So my background is really comes from the sciences. And then when my son was diagnosed, that was when I say ADHD came into my life. And I realized even as that specialist or that expert who was diagnosing people with ADHD, I did not really know how to help him in a way that preserved this amazing brilliance that I saw in this young man, right? I saw the challenges he had and I knew how it affected him. And so that kind of became my original 20 some years ago, my impetus for looking into more about ADHD, and eventually led to discovering the profession of coaching. And I'm a International Coach Federation certified coach. I saw what a difference that particular kind of approach made with my son, with my rest of my family. And then about 5 years ago, I opened my own training program where I am now training people who have a similar background, where they themselves has ADHD or love someone who have ADHD, who want to make a difference and help and using the coaching model in order to do that.
Awesome. That's brilliant. And so, I'd like to ask a question about that, because I'd imagine a lot of people that are viewing may not know about ADHD coaching, or they've heard of it, but they don't know exactly what it does or what that model is. Can you briefly tell us about what that is so people understand that what the benefit is in them finding an ADHD coach and how it can help them?
Yeah. So coaching itself, I think I have to go back just a bit. Coaching itself's been around for about 25 years. It was an outgrowth of multiple different disciplines. ADHD coaching and many other, and it is regulated and has a standards and ethics by the International Coach Federation. It's a particular specific type of discipline that incorporates, I call sort of all the best bits of some other types of models, therapy being one of them, philosophy, mentoring, consulting, all of those types of things. Sometime in the last 20 years or so, people who were experiencing ADHD realized that this model with its emphasis, or the coaching model with this emphasis on being able to identify what a challenge is and to set a goal and to take actions on that and to move forward and to gain self-awareness was really very, very useful to people with ADHD. So what makes a difference, I think, for a lot of people, and I know for my son, is that when you have ADHD, understanding how your brain works, because everybody is a bit different, how your brain works, being able to get clarity about what it is that works for you, what doesn't work for you, what the direction is you want to take in your life, and how to break that down into steps, and also to become self-empowered in the process. Because what makes coaching very different than, for instance, a therapeutic field is that we really work as a partnership with our clients, in that we're encouraging them to develop those skills of being able to identify their own challenges, their own strengths, so that they can leverage them, rather than being the one who tells them what to do.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And, you know, part of that's a good segue to what we're doing here, because part of what we want to do here is change the narrative around ADHD. The narrative currently is that it's a disease, that it's a disorder, that it's negative and bad. And really what we hope to do is say, you know, there's another edge to that sword that's much much more motivating and much more inspiring, and that is that there's a brilliant part of that child or that adult that once it's accessed, once it's managed, it can come shining through, just like Edison, just like Einstein, just like, you know, some of these brilliant people that you hear about in the world, and that's accessible when you manage it. And that's why it sounds like that's why coaching is so important, is because you can start to organize your thoughts and get systems in place so you
Hmm.
can manage that ADHD.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, it can be difficult because I grew up with a father who I discovered through this process had ADHD, and I know what unmanaged ADHD can look like as a child, and as and then growing up as an adult into adulthood. So managing it is it can be a matter of life and death, really, considering
Yeah.
that's out there.
Yeah, it really can. And if you don't know that that's what you're managing, what happens when you're talking about the narrative,
Hmm.
um, all sorts of other reasons are used to explain why somebody has this behavior.
Right.
They're irresponsible, they don't care, they don't have their priorities straight, right? Things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Lazy or whatever. Yeah.
Lazy, yes.
Right. And when you, I've noticed that in my discussions with so many of the experts out there, including yourself, that when you start to manage it, you can start to shift this and understand that you can embrace the ADHD. It's like, it's not something that I don't want to admit anymore. It's not something I want to hide. It's something that I want to embrace and I want to celebrate, because guess what? I can do things with my brain that a lot of you can't.
Yeah.
But I have to manage it in order to get to that you know,
Right.
that diamond on the other
Yeah.
side of the hole.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we have to do a bit of excavating.
Yes.
If you, like you kind of were talking about, the narrative is, and it would, unfortunately, it's still very common for people to feel have a lot of shame, a lot of secrecy around their ADHD. That's why I love these programs that you're doing to bring out and emphasize some of the other aspects of ADHD. But
Mhm.
when we've spent time, and I see this even in young children, it starts very, very young with um, covering up either our natural feelings or tendencies or talents or gifts or thoughts or whatever that is.
Mhm.
It can oftentimes feel like we're excavating, trying to get down there to that diamond. And I've been doing this a very, very long time. Bob, I've been, like I said, an ADHD life coach full time for about 18 years now. And I have never met someone with ADHD doesn't have that brilliance inside. And it's unfortunately their experience, if they don't have any other way to explain why they always feel like they're wrong or they're getting in trouble or they're being punished, children are going to make up why that's happening, and it's going to feel bad, and they don't get to appreciate those diamonds, as you say.
Right. So let's jump into what we're going to talk about today, which you talked about tolerances, and there's different ways to say that, but can you define what you mean? Because what we're going to talk about today is tolerances, and how tolerances or people with ADHD don't realize how tolerances impact their experience.
Right.
Can you talk about a little bit about tolerances, what we mean, and then let's set a roadmap for what we're going to tell our viewers today, and then we'll go through the three-step process that you
Okay.
have. So I think
Yeah. This is something that I work with. I use this exercise with my own clients. It's something I also teach at the IX Center to the students, because as we just got through talking about, when you have ADHD, uh, we are often, tolerations are those things that we are just sort of putting up with. And it may never occur to us that we don't need to. Sometimes that might be, they can oftentimes show up sort of as like mental blocks. And at the very least, they are distractions for us. in our ability to pay attention, to focus, to get things done. So tolerations are those things that we're putting up with. And I really do believe that based on the experience that most people have with ADHD, early on they start to doubt their ability to say, wait a minute, I don't want to be walking around with that rock in my shoe. Why do I have to do that? That doesn't feel natural to me. But when we're young and somebody says, no, everybody walks around with that rock in their shoe or two rocks in their shoe, most children will do that because that's part of how we survive. We do it the adults in our lives tell us to do. Unfortunately, what happens is at the same time, we're developing a lack of confidence in our own self-judgment about what's true for us. And so they just literally pile on. However you want to think about that, whether they're now walking around with 50 rocks in their shoes thinking, well, everybody else must do this. I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing, even though it doesn't feel really good. Or I'm having a hard time paying attention because I'm distracted by that particular noise over there. I guess I'm supposed to just put up with that because that's what everybody else seems to be doing. There's the whole experience of having ADHD can have us doubting our own judgment. And when we do that and we have all these tolerations in our lives, it can just completely drain our energy and prevent us from being able to gain that self-awareness or move forward the way that we want to in our lives.
Awesome. So understanding that that there's toleration, that there's these things about yourself that people say to you that you accept as true, right? And when they really aren't true, they're just a perception, a version of it, and that you can change that, you can shift it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you were saying that a toleration could be where we continue to tell ourselves, oh, I can't do this, I'm stupid, or I couldn't do that job.
Right.
That actually is an example of a toleration that is unfortunately very common for people with ADHD. It keeps us from moving forward. And it might never occur to us because for so much of our lives, we have felt that we're wrong, that we don't judge things exactly right. It may never occur to us that that isn't true, and we don't need to keep carrying that around.
Great. So you have a process, and I really
Yes.
want to dig into this because you got some great stories to share with it as well. A process to help us get through that, get over the tolerations, get through them, and start to shift those. So what is the 3-step process? And then let's dig into number 1.
Well, the 3-step process includes, and anybody who understands coaching will know this, is really being aware that something is getting in our way, that something is bothering us, that something is draining our energy or taking our attention away from where we want it to be. So the first step is a simple awareness of that. And I'll give some examples. I think one of the greatest examples that I have is the student I worked with that realized that where his light was based in his room when he studied made a huge difference. His mom had placed it on like the left side because that was just where it ended up. And it really, he realized that it really bothered him, and he simply moved it over to the right, had to get an extension cord, but made all the difference for him. And this young man now is working actually on a PhD in engineering. I'm not saying it's all because he moved a light, but he realized that just because his mom put it on the left doesn't mean I need to stay there. I can move it to the right if I want to. So being aware of those things that are draining your energy, it could be a thought, it could be something in our environment that we just never really thought about, that it is actually bothering us and taking our attention away. The second one is, after we are aware of it, is to make a choice, because we actually can choose what we want to do about that, which is a very new concept to a lot of people with ADHD. I think most people with ADHD feel very disempowered, very out of control. Starting from a young age, we're oftentimes told what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. So any sort of innate sense of making a choice, I can do it a different way, can oftentimes be a bit of a different concept for them. But yes, you absolutely do have a choice. And the three choices you have is to keep it. So for instance, this young man is just the starting example, could have said, I know this drives me crazy. I'm just going to leave the light on the left and put up with it, even though it does bother me. Or you can choose to eliminate it. So get completely rid of the light. That could have been an option. I think even when we realize we have two options, it's like, wow, who knew, right?
Right.
Right. The third one is to fix it. So, which is exactly what this young man did. He decided he was going to fix it. He moved the lamp from the left to the right and fixed what that annoyingness was for him. It may seem very small to somebody else, but sensory input or sensory tolerations are huge for people with ADHD. So this is not a small matter for somebody when they've been tolerating input of light on one side and then moved it to the other side. And the third option you have is, like I said, is to fix it. Or one of them, which we oftentimes wouldn't, it is probably the most surprising to most people, is what we call change your perspective around it, right? Changing your perspective around it, where you haven't changed the situation, you haven't changed the thought, the environment, but you change how you interpret it.
Right.
Because when we are putting up with tolerations, they are not only distracting us and making it hard for us to focus on what we want to, because they're constant, just like they're nagging at us, but they are also draining our energy. So when we're trying to struggle with that motivation, or trying to struggle with following through, or trying to struggle with focusing, if we're tolerating things, we're starting at a deficit.
Yeah, and it sounds like that would be the most powerful one of the things you listed, which is shifting your perspective, because a lot of times the challenges that we have are beliefs, right? They're invisible, and they're in our mind, and the only we can, so to eliminate it is like, yeah, good luck with that, right? or to change it, or to change it would be to shift our perspective, and even to fix it would be to shift our perspective. So
Yes.
shifting our
Yeah.
perspective sounds like is really the big lesson here, is shifting your perspective on how you see it. Like, maybe that light actually is pretty good right there.
Yeah.
Or maybe maybe I'm not whatever somebody said I
Right.
was. Maybe
Right.
I'm actually this.
Yeah.
Maybe they're thinking, maybe they've been told they are something.
Yes.
Um,
So I love that you bring up this idea, and I do believe that the ADHD perspective or the experience starts very young. Whether we're diagnosed with ADHD as a child or an adult, the experience starts very young. So we oftentimes have internalized, based on what other people say, what's true about us. We call them in coaching rules and beliefs. You mentioned that, like, this must be true about me. I must be stupid. I must be lazy. I must not be capable. I must not be living up to my potential. We can internalize those. It doesn't necessarily make them true, which is a whole nother conversation. But when we're tolerating all of this negative type of perspective in our day, it prevents us from really being fully present, I think, to be able to do what we want to do. An example I like to use when I first was learning about this particular concept is where I lived in a small house when I was raising my kids. I have 4 kids, and we were lucky. They had a lot of friends over. I'm an animal lover, so I always had at least 3 typically adopted or rescued dogs, cats, chickens that discovered the cat dog door, so they were in and out of the house. And part of my carpet was really, really dirty, and it really bothered me. And I remember and I felt like, and every time I looked at it, and there was no way not to, because there was only one hall through the house,
Mhm.
I would feel this sense of, oh, I'm a terrible mom, I'm a terrible parent, I'm a terrible housekeeper, because I
Yeah.
can't even keep this carpet clean. Like, what
Yeah.
kind of a parent am I? And I spent a lot of time scrubbing it. I mean, so with tolerations too, they not only can distract us mentally or emotionally, but physically they can distract us as we're trying to eliminate them, right?
Right.
um, when I learned about this process of first being aware of something that was a toleration, and I realized that I was tolerating this dirty carpet, and that one of the options was to leave it there, which wasn't gonna work for me. That I knew that. Eliminate it. I was really excited that the possibility, Bob, of being able to rip that carpet out, but we didn't have the money to replace it, so that wasn't going to work.
Mhm.
Um, to fix it, which I kept trying to do, I would have keepers come in, and I would spot clean it and stuff all the time. But the one that was the most changing for me, and the one that is surprising for a lot of people, is a perspective change. There was no other perspective I could have about this carpet, but it was a dirty, hot mess, and it was evidence of so many things that I was doing wrong.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me that what that maybe what this carpet represented was the fact that I was fortunate enough to live in a home where I had these wonderful children who had these friends that were coming in and out, and these beautiful creatures in my life that also were creating a bit to the untidiness of it, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't have changed it for the world. So then, now you have to understand, I still spot clean this carpet quite a bit, but every time then I looked at that carpet, I was like, look at me. I've got this. I have these blessings in my life, and this is one of the ways that they show up. So that's just an example of that changing the perspective.
Now, what did you do to change your perspective? I mean, did you
Oh
just,
gosh.
yeah,
So yeah, I love that. So what's that like thing?
yeah,
So I think when we're changing our perspective, the questions that you ask yourself, is there any other way for me to to explain this, or to look at this, or to see this? Is there any other way? Um, Part of it is actually really being clear with how, and I know this may sound silly, but miserable and disgusting I was with this dirty carpet. And usually when we do that, what starts to happen is that it starts to bring up some of those old rules and old beliefs that somehow I had inherited, that if you're a good mom, your carpets are always clean, or if you're a good housekeeper, your carpets are always clean, that kind of thing.
right.
So when you start to allow yourself, because most of the time, if something's bothering us, we stay as far away from it as possible. But
Hmm.
in this way, what we're doing is we're really getting clear about what it is that really bothers us about that, and that can start to bring up some of what you were saying. Are some of those, is that really true or not? Am I
Hmm.
really not a good mom? Am I really not a good housekeeper? Am I a terrible person because my carpets are clean? We can start to ask and challenge ourselves about the truth of that. And when we're able maybe to challenge those, or at least to see, gosh, for me, I don't think that that's really true. Maybe that was true for my grandmother or my mother, or maybe that was true for some other woman out there. I don't even know where I got that message, but it wasn't true for me. I did feel like I was a good mom, and my kids seemed happy, and my pets certainly were happy. Then I think it allows us to be able to sort of free ourselves up to say, well, so what else could this represent to me?
Right.
What else is possible? Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like step one was to notice. You said step two was to choose, one of the three things that you discussed. And then step three, it sounds like you need to take action of some sort, which is maybe staying conscious. For people with ADHD, I think that seems like it's hard. And that's why people like yourself exist with coaching. Like, it's like, that's where the coach, I think, really can come
Yeah.
in. Is that correct?
Yeah. 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 We don't even notice that we have been, been losing energy. Sometimes I think about it like a bucket with holes in it. You know, you fill in the bucket and you can't figure out why it's not filling up because there's just
Right.
holes everywhere. We can't figure out why we have no energy or focus is gone. We can't, it's hard for us to see that in ourselves. And the benefit of a coach is that, again, it's not judgment there, but we have that I think we see our clients much more brilliant than they may even see themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we're there to maybe challenge that particular belief or that particular rule or that particular idea that they had about themselves, or at least to start asking what part of that may not be true, or is there another something else that you can replace that with that feels more empowering, that feels more more, I want to say, life sustaining or affirming for
Right.
you.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like coaching is also starting a habit of questioning, right? Questioning those things that
Mhm.
are stopping
Yeah.
you, those beliefs that you have
Yeah.
about yourself that
Yeah.
maybe people tell you that aren't true, and you can
Yeah. I
reframe.
think, yeah, I think with the, I think that people, the benefit of even starting with just noticing tolerations, and even making a list of the tolerations in your life. I have my clients and the students in my training program write about 25 to 50 tolerations. And I think it frightens them because they're like, oh my gosh, I've been putting up with these things. But sometimes they're little things like, you know, a light bulb that might be out, or a pen that we keep picking up that's empty. It sometimes it can be thoughts in our head, and it's a perspective. Sometimes, you know, throwing away that pen is one of the it is the empowering act to do. But what we start to realize, which I think a lot of people haven't for a very long time, is to realize that we do have choice in our lives. If we don't have choice to eliminate something, we have a choice about how we can think about it,
Mhm.
and we can start to feel empowered. And it actually becomes sort of a habitual thinking where we start to go, well, wait a minute, let me see if that's really true or not. Or is there another way I can think about that, or another approach I can take to
Yeah.
that particular challenge?
Yeah. Yeah. And I come from the personal development space, and that is the point of personal development, is to help be aware, right? And they do a brilliant job of being aware, helping people be aware. Making a new decision, that can be tougher. Certainly, shifting those thoughts about yourself, shifting that perspective, is the most difficult piece. But it sounds like it's much harder for a person with ADHD to go through that same process. So it sounds like the coaching is really important for people to start that road to success, and managing, right, their ADHD, so they can access that brilliance.
Yeah, I think it's the becoming aware of it. I think it's what happens when you are eliminating, for looking at, you know, tolerations, is it what happens is we start to strip away those things that aren't true about us, or that we might have just accepted because as we were growing up, we were told that's the way that you were supposed to do it. And we can start becoming aware of what's underneath there, that brilliance, as you mentioned, those strengths, those talents that oftentimes were covered by some of those other um, distractions or um, false beliefs or things like that, that we just took on as kids growing up in the world.
Right.
Uh, Being able to shift your perspective about something, I always say sometimes you don't have to when I'm working with clients. There are some people who, you know, they go right through the front door and they open it up and they see a whole new world, and they're off and they get it right away. Sometimes you have to sort of nudge it open. At least even just one shift in a perspective allows your brain to go, wow, there are other options here. There are other ways that I might be able to work on this or see this. And there may, and as we even just experience a small success, I call it sort of just a crack in the door, small success, we can really build on that, right? That gives us a little bit of confidence, which unfortunately for a lot of people with ADHD, it's been a while since they've been able to experience that.
Yeah.
And it's a technique that they can use over and over and over again when something isn't working for them, to realize, okay, let me think through this process. So that I'm not at the mercy of just taking on one more, use the analogy of one more rock in my shoe, but maybe I decide this time I'm going to build, you know, I don't know, what are they called? They look like human beings there. It's actually a tribal sort of,
Totem pole.
yeah, or like a totem pole, or it's actually something else, but like maybe I'm going to build a wall with it, or I'm going to create a rock garden with my rocks, right? They don't have to be in my shoes anymore. I can let them out and I can create a rock garden with them. I always can put them back in if I want. That's something we always have a choice of doing. But I don't think a lot of people with ADHD ever consider all of the things that are getting in the way of their brilliance shining through.
Yeah.
And I've never met anyone without ADHD that doesn't have that amazingness.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's excellent information. So, so there you have it. You can actually, and that's what they do in coaching, with ADHD coaching. You can actually help yourself break through those limiting challenges, those tolerations, so you can access that brilliance through Laurie Dupar's method. And how do people find you if they want to work with you or have questions, etc.? How would they find you, Laurie?
Yeah, the best place to go, I'll just give you one website, because otherwise it can get confusing. Just go to our training website. It's the IACT Center, IACTcenter.com.
Awesome.
And you can find me and all about what we do.
Perfect. And we will have a link to that below this video, as well as a free gift from Laurie. And thank you so much for being on our program today.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks.
Yeah.
Fun.
Thank you all for viewing and this episode of the ADHD Toolbox Part 2. And we will see you on the next episode. Thanks.
Bye-bye.